What if every night you went to sleep, someone or something was watching you from the shadows? This is not a story I wanted to tell, but now that it's over, I feel like I have no choice. You see, exactly 1 year ago, I accepted a challenge that would change my life forever. I spent 100 consecutive nights in an abandoned mansion on the outskirts of town, a place locals call the Widow's Asylum. They say bad things happen there, terrible things. And after what I experienced, well, let's just say I'll never look at darkness the same way again. By the end of this video, you might think I'm crazy. Or maybe you'll believe me. It all started with a dare. A group of friends and I were sitting around a campfire, swapping ghost stories late into the night. One of them mentioned the mansion, a crumbling relic of a bygone era, shrouded in mystery and urban legends. Some claimed it was cursed. Others swore they'd seen strange lights flickering in its windows late at night. Naturally, we laughed it off until someone dared me to stay there for 100 nights. Alone. At first I thought it sounded ridiculous. Who would willingly subject themselves to such a thing? But then pride kicked in. I didn't want to seem weak. So against my better judgment, I agreed. Little did I know, those 100 nights would become the longest and most terrifying of my life. The mansion itself was a monstrosity. Its once grand facade had been ravaged by time and neglect. Windows were shattered, their jagged edges glinting like teeth in the moonlight. The front door groaned as I pushed it open, revealing a cavernous foyer choked with dust and decay. Cobwebs hung like curtains. Swaying gently in the draft, it smelled of rot and rust, a scent that clung to my clothes and hair long after I left each day. But despite its decrepit appearance, there was something undeniably sinister about the place. Something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up every time I stepped inside. Little did I know, those 100 nights would become the longest and most terrifying of my life. Before moving in, I did some research. Locals spoke of disappearances tied to the mansion. Decades earlier, a wealthy widow named Eleanor Blackwood had lived there. She was rumored to dabble in dark rituals, summoning spirits to do her bidding. When she vanished without a trace, the mansion was sealed off. Over the years, trespassers reported hearing whispers, seeing shadowy figures, and experiencing inexplicable phenomena. Most never returned. Those who did came back changed, paranoid, haunted, or worse. As I unpacked my belongings on that first day, I couldn't shake the feeling that the mansion was alive. The walls seemed to breathe. Floorboards groaned as though protesting my presence. Even the air felt heavier, pressing down on me like an invisible weight. Still, I convinced myself it was just nerves. After all, how bad could it really be? Little did I know those 100 nights would become the longest and most terrifying of my life. As I unpacked my belongings on that first day, I couldn't shake the feeling that the mansion was alive, not in the literal sense, but in a way that defied explanation. The walls seemed to breathe. The floorboards groaned as though protesting my presence. Even the air felt heavier, pressing down on me like an invisible weight. Still, I convinced myself it was just nerves. After all, how bad could it really be? Night 1 started innocently enough. The mansion was cold, damp, and smelled faintly of mildew. It wasn't until midnight when things took a turn. As I lay in bed, trying to ignore the creaks and groans of the old house settling, I heard it, a whisper. At first I thought it was my imagination, but then it came again, louder this time. Leave. I froze. My heart pounded as I scanned the room, but there was no one there, just silence. Then the walls began to hum, a low, vibrating noise that made my teeth ache. That's when I noticed the writing. Scrawled across the peeling wallpaper were words written in what looked like charcoal. She knows you're here. Who was she? And why did they warn me? I tried to rationalize it. Maybe some prankster had broken in earlier and left the message as a joke. But deep down, I knew better. There was something about the handwriting, its jagged, uneven strokes, that felt unnatural, like it hadn't been written by human hands. I spent the rest of the night pacing the halls, too afraid to close my eyes. Every shadow seemed alive, shifting and twisting in ways that defied logic. By morning I was exhausted, but determined to see this through. As the sun rose, the mansion transformed. Shadows receded and the oppressive atmosphere lifted slightly. I told myself it was all in my head, fatigue playing tricks on me. But even as I packed up my things and prepared to leave for the day, I couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was still watching me. From the corners of rooms, from behind cracked doors, from places I couldn't quite see. That evening, when I returned, the writing on the wall had changed. The original message was gone, replaced by a single sentence: shouldn't have come back. It was written in the same jagged handwriting, but this time it was accompanied by a series of numbers, 99. I stared at them for a long time, wondering what they meant. Was it a countdown, a warning, or something else entirely? By night 7, I'd convinced myself the whispers were stress-induced hallucinations, but then I found the mirror. It hung crookedly in the attic, its surface clouded with age. Something about it felt wrong, like it didn't belong in this world. Against my better judgment, I stared into it, and that's when I saw her. A woman stood behind me, her face pale and distorted. Her eyes were black voids, and her mouth stretched impossibly wide. She smiled, but only in the reflection. When I turned around, the room was empty. That's when I learned about the mirror game. Urban legends say if you stare into certain mirrors long enough, you can summon spirits trapped between worlds. What they don't tell you is how hard it is to make them leave. I couldn't bring myself to smash the mirror that night. Instead, I covered it with a sheet and retreated to my bedroom. But even then, I could feel her presence lingering nearby, waiting for me to lower my guard. Over the next few days, I avoided the attic entirely. Yet no matter where I went in the mansion, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was watching me, watching and waiting. Her visits became more frequent. Or sometimes I'd catch a glimpse of her reflection in a window or a puddle of water. Other times I'd hear her voice, soft, melodic whisper calling my name. It was maddening. Each encounter chipped away at my sanity, leaving me paranoid and sleep-deprived. On night 8, I decided to confront her. Armed with a flashlight and a shaky resolve, I returned to the attic. The mirror sat where I'd left it, the sheet draped haphazardly over its frame. Slowly, I pulled the fabric away, bracing myself for what I might see. At first, nothing happened. Then the glass rippled like liquid and her face emerged. Not in the reflection, but within the mirror itself. She reached out, her hand breaking through the surface. Grasping at the air, I stumbled backward, knocking over a stack of crates. When I looked again, the mirror was empty. The smell of sulfur lingered in the room, burning my nostrils. On night 15, I decided to explore the mansion's library. It was a vast, dimly lit room filled with towering shelves crammed with dusty books. The air was thick with the smell of aged paper and ink. As I ran my fingers along the spines, I felt an inexplicable pull toward one particular book, a leather-bound tome with no title. When I opened it, the pages were blank except for a single sentence scrawled in red ink. Read aloud, and they will come. Curiosity got the better of me. I whispered the words under my breath, and instantly the room grew colder. The books began to rattle on their shelves, and faint whispers filled the air. Panicked, I slammed the book shut and fled the library, but the whispers followed me, echoing in my ears long after I'd left the room. That night, I dreamed of the library. The shelves stretched endlessly into darkness, and the books floated around me, their pages flipping wildly. In the center of the room stood the woman from the mirror, holding the leather-bound tome. She smiled as she opened it, revealing pages filled with my name, written over and over again. When I woke up, the book was lying on my bedside table, its cover warm to the touch. Over the next several nights, I avoided the library at all costs, but the book kept reappearing in random places. In my backpack, under my pillow, even tucked inside my jacket pocket. Each time I found it, a new sentence would appear on its pages. They are closer than you think. Do not trust the light. Run while you still can. I tried burning it, burying it, throwing it into the river. Nothing worked. It always came back, taunting me with cryptic messages that gnawed at my sanity. Some horrors aren't supernatural. They're psychological. By night 23, I was exhausted. Sleep deprivation had taken its toll, and I was starting to question my sanity. That's when I met Emily. She appeared in the hallway outside my bedroom wearing a tattered pink dress. Her blonde hair framed her cherubic face, but her expression was anything but innocent. She asked me to play hide and seek. Reluctantly, I agreed. It seemed harmless enough, until she disappeared. One second she was standing right in front of me, and the next, she was gone. No footprints, no sound, nothing. I searched the entire mansion, calling her name, but deep down I knew she wasn't real. Not anymore. Later, I discovered newspaper clippings hidden in the basement. They told the story of a young girl named Emily who vanished without a trace decades ago. Some say her ghost haunts the mansion, luring visitors into games they can't win. That night I dreamed of her. She stood at the foot of my bed, smiling sweetly, but when I reached out to touch her, her form dissolved into smoke, leaving behind only a single word etched into my pillowcase: stay. After that, Emily became a constant presence. She'd appear in unexpected places: the corner of my eye, the edge of a photograph, the reflection in a spoon, always smiling, always watching. I began to dread falling asleep, knowing she'd be waiting for me in my dreams. And when I woke up, the word stay would always be there, carved into something new: my arm, my desk, wall above my bed. It was as if she was marking her territory, claiming me as her own. One particularly harrowing night, I found myself unable to move. Paralyzed, I watched as Emily materialized at the foot of my bed. She held a doll in her arms, its porcelain face cracked and smeared with dirt. She whispered softly, "You promised to play." Before I could respond, the doll's head snapped upward, its empty eye sockets locking onto mine. Then everything went black. When I woke up, I was outside the mansion, lying in the grass. The clock read 3:33 a.m. I had no memory of how I got there. Night 33 brought another unsettling discovery: the grandfather clock in the main hall. It had been silent since my arrival, its pendulum frozen mid-swing. But that night, it sprang to life, ticking loudly and relentlessly. No matter what I did, I couldn't stop it. Even when I removed the weights and disconnected the mechanism, the ticking continued, growing louder with each passing hour. Then, at exactly 3:33 a.m., the clock struck 13 times. The sound reverberated through the mansion, shaking the very foundation of the house. When the final chime faded, I noticed something strange. The numbers on the clock face had rearranged themselves to spell out a single word: run. I didn't need to be told twice. I grabbed my belongings and bolted for the door. As I reached for the handle, it locked itself. Behind me, the clock began ticking again, faster this time. I turned to face it, and that's when I saw him, the man in the photograph. He stood beside the clock, his unnaturally wide grin stretching across his face. Before I could react, the lights went out, plunging the mansion into darkness. When the power returned moments later, the clock was gone. In its place was a pile of ashes ashes, still warm to the touch, but the ticking remained, echoing in my ears long after I'd fled the mansion. For weeks afterward, I couldn't escape the sound. It followed me everywhere, in my dreams, in my waking hours, even in the quietest moments of solitude. I began to wonder if the clock had marked me somehow, binding me to the mansion in ways I couldn't comprehend. If there's one rule everyone agrees on, it's this: never open the basement door. Of course, curiosity got the better of me. On night 45, I broke that rule. The air inside was thick and oppressive, like walking through water. A single bulb flickered overhead, casting eerie shadows on the walls. In the center of the room sat a rocking chair, moving back and forth despite the absence of wind. Beside it was a cradle, its contents obscured by a blood-stained blanket. I should have left, but instead I reached for the blanket, and that's when I heard it. A voice, raspy and guttural, whispering directly into my ear, "You shouldn't be here." When I finally escaped, the cradle was empty, but the smell of iron lingered on my hands for days. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. All I could think about was what, or who I might have disturbed down there. The basement haunted me long after I left it. I'd hear the sound of the rocking chair creaking in the dead of night, even though I was miles away from the mansion. Sometimes I'd wake up to find the blanket draped over my body, its metallic stench filling the room. It was as if whatever lived in that basement had followed me home, refusing to let me go. On night 46, I attempted to seal the basement door permanently. I nailed boards across it, chained it shut, and even painted over it with thick layers of paint. But none of it worked. By morning, the door was wide open, the chains and boards scattered across the floor. Inside, the rocking chair moved faster than ever before, its rhythmic creaking driving me to the brink of madness. I realized then that the basement wasn't just a part of the mansion. It was alive, feeding off my fear and drawing me closer with each passing night. Not all ghosts are bound to places. Some follow people. By night 66, I started noticing strange details in photographs I took of the mansion. Faces peering out of windows, figures standing where no one should be, but none were as unsettling as the man in the photograph. He wore a suit and tie, his face obscured by shadow. At first glance, he seemed ordinary. The longer I stared, the more I realized something was off. His proportions were wrong, too tall, too thin, and his smile, it curved upward unnaturally, splitting his face almost ear to ear. Stranger still, he appeared in every photo I took, always watching me. I tried burning the pictures, but they kept reappearing. Even now, whenever I develop film or scroll through my phone, he's there, watching, always watching. The man in the photograph became an obsession. I couldn't stop looking at him, trying to decipher his cryptic grin. Was he mocking me, warning me, or simply enjoying the spectacle of my unraveling mind? Whatever his intentions, he was relentless. He followed me everywhere, in mirrors, reflections, even fleeting glimpses in crowds. One night, I decided to confront him. Using a Polaroid camera, I took a picture of myself in the mirror. When the image developed, I nearly dropped it in shock. The man wasn't just standing behind me. He was reaching out, his skeletal fingers inches from my shoulder. Beneath the photo, words had appeared, scrawled in the same jagged handwriting I'd seen on the walls. "You're running out of time." By night 77, I was beginning to lose track of reality. The mansion seemed to shift and change around me, its layout becoming increasingly impossible to navigate. Doors led to places they shouldn't. Staircases spiraled downward into darkness. And then there was the hallway. It started as an ordinary corridor, lined with closed doors. But as I walked, it stretched endlessly before me, the walls narrowing and the ceiling lowering until I had to crawl on my hands and knees. The air grew colder, and the sound of distant sobbing echoed around me. At the end of the hallway, I found a single door, its surface covered in claw marks. When I opened it, I was greeted by a blinding light, and the sight of myself standing in the exact same spot I'd started from. Confused and disoriented, I retraced my steps, only to find that the hallway had changed again. This time, the walls were covered in photographs, all of them featuring me. Some showed happy moments from my past. Others depicted scenes I didn't recognize, including one where I stood over a grave, holding a shovel. In each photo, the man from the mirror loomed in the background, his grin growing wider with every step I took. Eventually, I collapsed from exhaustion, waking up hours later in my bedroom. The hallway was gone, but the images stayed with me, burned into my mind like a brand. I couldn't shake the feeling that the mansion was showing me glimpses of my future, a future I desperately wanted to avoid. As the 100th night approached, the mansion grew restless. Doors slammed shut on their own. Lights flickered unpredictably. Shadows moved faster than they should. I could feel it, the presence gathering strength, preparing for something big. On night 99, I woke up to find the numbers 100 carved into my arm. Blood seeped through the wounds, staining the sheets beneath me. Panic set in as I realized I hadn't done it myself. Whatever lived in that house knew I was leaving, and it wasn't happy. That's when I heard the laughter, high-pitched and manic. It echoed through the halls, growing louder with each passing second. I grabbed my bag and ran, slamming the front door behind me. But as I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw her, the woman from the mirror, smiling, waving goodbye. The drive home was a blur. My hands trembled on the wheel, and my mind raced with unanswered questions. Had I truly escaped? Or was this just the beginning of something far worse? When I arrived at my apartment, I collapsed onto the couch, too drained to move. But as I drifted off to sleep, I heard her voice one last time. "Thank you for staying." So, what happened on night 100? Honestly, I don't know, because I never made it back. After fleeing the mansion, I run to my apartment and collapsed. When I woke up, it was morning, and the clock read 100. Somehow, the mansion had claimed its final night, even though I wasn't there. To this day, I wonder, did I escape? Or am I still trapped, reliving those horrors over and over again? And if you ever hear a whisper in the dark telling you to leave, will you listen? Will you? Because sometimes the scariest part isn't the monsters hiding in the shadows. It's realizing that you might already be one of them. If you enjoyed this chilling tale, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more spine-tingling stories. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think happened on night 100? Did I survive? Or am I still trapped in that nightmare? Let us know. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and remember, the darkness is always watching.